The sky turned dark at noon. Over the Pacific Ocean, where moments ago the sun had burned bright and warm, a shadow spread across the water like spilled ink. Fishing boats rocked in sudden waves. Birds scattered from the coastlines of a dozen nations. And 10,000 warships emerged from the fabric of space itself, blotting out the light over half the world. Admiral Voreth Ken stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the blue planet turn beneath him. He had conquered 300 worlds in his long career. He had brought empires to their knees and crushed rebellions before they could begin. He knew exactly what he was looking at. Another primitive species, another easy victory, another world to add to the endless glory of the Galaxy Empire. Initial scans complete. Admiral, his sensor officer reported, Class 7 developing world, population approximately 9 billion. Technology level, early space age, no faster than light capability detected. Planetary defense grid, none. Military assessment, minimal threat. Vorath allowed himself a small smile. The Empire had been expanding for 40,000 years, swallowing star system after star system into its vast domain. In all that time, no species had successfully resisted annexation. Some fought briefly, some surrendered immediately, all eventually knelt before imperial power. This world would be no different. Ambassador Voss, he said, turning to the tall female standing near the viewport. You may deliver the decree. Ambassador Taylor Voss had spent her entire career bringing new species into the Empire. She was good at her job. She knew exactly what to say, how to say it, and when to let the threat of the fleet speak for itself. She stepped forward, activated the universal broadcast system, and began to speak. Her words went out on every frequency the Empire had detected humanity using. Television signals, radio waves, digital networks. Within seconds, every screen on Earth displayed her image. Every speaker carried her voice. People of Earth, she said, her tone calm and measured. I am Ambassador Taylor Voss of the Galaxy Empire. I speak to you today with an offer of peace and prosperity. The Empire spans millions of worlds across this galaxy. We bring order to chaos. We bring technology to the primitive. We bring unity to the divided. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Your world has been selected for integration into the Empire. This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. You have 30 standard days to comply with the following terms. All military forces will be disbanded. All weapons will be surrendered. All governments will be dissolved and replaced with imperial administration. In exchange, you will receive the benefits of imperial citizenship, advanced medicine, clean energy, a place in our great civilization. Another pause. Then the threat delivered with practiced ease. Resistance is not advised. Resistance is not tolerated. Those who oppose the Empire are removed. You have 30 days. Use them wisely. The broadcast ended. Taylor turned to Admiral Voreth with a satisfied nod. In her experience, most species surrendered within hours of receiving the decree. The sight of 10,000 warships overhead had a way of focusing the mind. But something unusual happened. For several hours there was no response at all. The Empire's communication officers monitored every channel, waiting for the panicked transmissions, the desperate pleas for negotiation, the internal conflicts as different factions argued over how to respond. They heard none of it. Instead, they detected something strange. Secure transmissions between governments, encrypted data bursts spanning the globe, and then silence. Complete, coordinated silence. Admiral, the communications officer said, confusion in his voice, we're receiving a response, but it's not coming from any single nation. It's coming from something called the United Terran Council. Voreth frowned. Their intelligence had indicated this world was divided into nearly 200 separate nations, constantly fighting among themselves. There had been no mention of any unified government. Put it through, he ordered. The main view screen flickered. A human male appeared. He was older, with gray hair and dark eyes that held no fear. He sat at a simple desk, the flag of a blue planet visible behind him. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. This is Secretary General Marcus Chen of the United Terran Council, speaking on behalf of all humanity. Vorath noticed the phrasing immediately. not on behalf of any nation, on behalf of the entire species. We have received your message, Ambassador Voss. We have discussed it among ourselves, and we have reached a unanimous decision. The human leaned forward slightly, and something in his eyes made Taylor's stomach tighten. Earth declines your offer. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. In 40,000 years, no species had ever simply declined. Furthermore, Chen continued, let me be absolutely clear about our position. The Galaxy Empire has no authority here. Your laws mean nothing in our system. Your decrees carry no weight on our world. Terran skies belong to Terra. They have always belonged to Terra. They will always belong to Terra. Admiral Vorath felt his jaw tighten. The audacity of this creature was almost impressive. You have 72 hours to withdraw your fleet from our solar system. After that time, we will consider your presence an act of war, and we will respond accordingly. Chen's expression never wavered. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then Admiral Vorath began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the command center. Did that primitive just threaten the Galaxy Empire? He asked, wiping his eyes. Did he just give us an ultimatum? The bridge crew joined in the laughter, though some of them seemed uncertain. Taylor Voss did not laugh. She stood very still, staring at the screen where the human's face had been. She had delivered the decree to over 50 species. She had seen fear. She had seen anger. She had seen desperation and denial, and everything in between. But she had never seen what she just saw in that human's eyes. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't even angry. He was warning them, like a man telling strangers not to step on a snake they hadn't noticed. Admiral, she said quietly, perhaps we should conduct additional reconnaissance before proceeding. Vorath waved his hand dismissively. There's nothing to reconnoiter, Ambassador. They're a primitive species with primitive weapons. They've clearly developed some kind of unified government since our last survey, but that changes nothing. If anything, it makes our job easier. One government to crush instead of 200. He turned to his tactical officer. Prepare a demonstration strike. Find an uninhabited area on their planet. An island, a desert, something visible but not populated. We'll show them what Imperial weapons can do. After they watch one of their landmarks turn to glass, they'll be much more willing to negotiate. Yes, Admiral. Taylor watched the officer's work, her unease growing with each passing moment. Something was wrong. Something she couldn't identify. The human's confidence had been too complete, too genuine. People facing certain defeat did not look like that. People facing certain death did not speak like that. What did they know that she didn't? On Earth, Secretary General Marcus Chen sat alone in his office after the transmission ended. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. He had just declared war on the largest military force in galactic history, and he felt nothing but resolve. His personal communicator buzzed. He answered it. It's done, he said. They'll attack soon. They always do. The voice on the other end belonged to his sister. Admiral Chen Wei commanded the United Terran Defense Force from her flagship, hidden in the shadow of Mars where no Imperial sensor could find it. We're ready, she said. We've been ready for 80 years. Casualties will be high. I know, but surrender isn't an option. It never was. Marcus closed his eyes. Humanity had known this day was coming since 1947, when the first Imperial probe had been detected entering their solar system. Every generation since had prepared for this moment. Secret programs, hidden shipyards, technologies developed in darkness and kept from prying eyes. The Empire thought they were conquering a primitive world. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Give them hell, Wei, he said softly. I intend to, brother. Above Earth, Admiral Vorath's demonstration missiles launched toward a small, uninhabited island in the South Pacific. They streaked through the atmosphere like falling stars, carrying enough destructive power to turn rock into vapor. They never reached their target. Across the planet, hidden platforms rose from the darkness of space. Weapon systems that hadn't existed on any Imperial scan powered up and fired. The missiles vanished in a series of brilliant explosions, destroyed thousands of kilometers from their destination. Admiral Vorth stared at the tactical display, his laughter dying in his throat. What? What was that? Admiral, the sensor officer said, his voice shaking. We're detecting weapons platforms in orbit around the planet. Hundreds of them. They weren't there before. They just appeared. Taylor Voss felt ice form in her stomach. The snake had just shown its fangs, and they had already stepped on it. The Galaxy Empire's intelligence division prided itself on knowing everything. Their survey probes had mapped millions of star systems. Their analysts had predicted the rise and fall of civilizations. Their data archives contained information about species that had died out before humanity's ancestors had learned to walk upright. And yet somehow, they had gotten Earth completely wrong. Director Koth Malin sat in his office aboard the intelligence ship Silent Observer, staring at sensor readings that made no sense. Just 80 years ago, his predecessors had sent a probe to the Sol system. The probe had spent 3 months studying Earth. It had recorded their primitive satellites, their chemical rockets, their petty wars between nations. It had classified humanity as a standard pre-contact species, thousands of years away from being a threat. Now he was looking at weapons platforms that could shoot down Imperial missiles. Weapons platforms that had appeared from nowhere. This is impossible, he muttered. They couldn't have developed this technology in 80 years. It takes species thousands of years to reach this level. His chief analyst, a thin female named Sarath, pulled up historical data on her screen. We've been reviewing the probe's original findings, Director. Everything appeared normal at the time. But looking back with what we know now, there are anomalies. What kind of anomalies? Small things. Unexplained power signatures in remote areas. Construction activity in locations where no construction should have been necessary. Encrypted communications that we dismissed as military exercises. She paused. We believed they knew we were watching, and they hid everything from us. Director Malin felt cold. In all of Imperial history, no primitive species had ever detected a survey probe. The probes were designed to be invisible, silent, undetectable by any technology below level 12 development. Earth was classified as level 7. How? He demanded. How did they find our probe? Sarath shook her head. We don't know, but we believe that everything we've seen of Earth for the past 80 years has been a performance, a show put on for our benefit. The real Earth, the true Earth. We're only seeing it now. On the flagship Eternal Dominion, Admiral Vorath was having the same terrible realization. His tactical displays showed hundreds of weapons platforms that hadn't been there an hour ago. His sensors were detecting power signatures beneath the lunar surface. His long-range scans were picking up strange readings from the asteroid belt, from the outer planets, from places where nothing should exist. How is this possible? He growled. Where did all of this come from? No one had an answer for him, but far away in a secret facility buried beneath the mountains of Switzerland, there were people who could have explained everything. People who had dedicated their entire lives to this moment. People who had kept humanity's greatest secret for 8 decades. General Sofia Rodriguez was 102 years old. She had spent 90 of those years serving the United Terran Defense Initiative, the most classified program in human history. She sat now in a wheelchair, watching banks of monitors that showed the Imperial fleet in orbit. Her eyes were weak, but her mind was sharp as ever. It's finally happening, she said to the young officer beside her. Everything we built, everything we sacrificed. It all comes down to this. Captain James Okonkwo nodded. He was 30 years old, third generation UTDI. His grandmother had helped design the first orbital defense platforms. His father had commanded one of the secret shipyards in the Kuiper Belt. His entire family had lived and died keeping humanity's secret. Tell me again how it started, he said. I've read the histories, but I want to hear it from someone who was there. General Rodriguez smiled. She had told this story many times. She never tired of it. It was 1947, she began. My grandmother was a young scientist working for the American government. She was part of a team studying unusual signals detected by early radar systems. One day they found something that didn't match anything on Earth. A probe. Small, silent, incredibly advanced. It was watching us. The Imperial Survey probe. Yes, though we didn't know what it was at the time. It took years to understand what we had found. decades to decode its transmissions. But eventually we learned the truth. We weren't alone in the universe. And whoever was out there wasn't friendly. She gestured at the monitors showing the Imperial fleet. The probe's data included records of other species, civilizations that had been conquered, absorbed, erased. We saw what the Empire did to worlds that resisted. We saw what they did to worlds that surrendered. Neither option was acceptable. Captain Okonkwo knew this part of the story. The secret meetings between world leaders, the impossible alliance between enemies. The Cold War had continued publicly, but behind closed doors, every major nation had agreed to set aside their differences. The survival of the species was more important than any political conflict. The public space programs were a cover, he said. Everything we showed the world was designed to make us look primitive. Exactly. We knew the probe was watching. We knew more probes would come. So we gave them what they expected to see. Rockets that barely worked. Satellites that fell out of orbit. Petty wars and political chaos. Meanwhile, the real work happened in secret. She pointed to a monitor showing the hidden fleet emerging from behind Mars. Shipyards in the asteroid belt, research stations on the moons of Jupiter, mining operations in the Kuiper belt, all invisible to anyone watching from outside the system, all building toward this day. But how did we develop faster-than-light travel? The Empire has had it for thousands of years. We had 80 years. General Rodriguez laughed. It was a dry, tired sound. We didn't develop it. We stole it. Captain Okonkwo stared at her. The probe, she explained. It had a faster-than-light communication system. Primitive by Imperial standards, but incredibly advanced by ours. Our scientists spent 40 years reverse engineering it. They didn't just copy it. They improved it. Took it in directions the Empire never imagined. She leaned forward in her wheelchair, her old eyes bright. That's humanity's gift, young man. We adapt. We innovate. We take what others have created and make it better. The Empire has had 40,000 years to perfect their technology. They've grown comfortable, stagnant. They haven't had a new idea in centuries because they've never needed one. She looked at the monitors showing human ships moving into battle formation. We've had 80 years of desperate, terrified innovation. 80 years of knowing that our survival depended on being smarter, faster, and more creative than an enemy that could crush us without effort. And now they're going to find out what humanity can do when we have no choice but to succeed. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Vorath was beginning to understand just how badly he had underestimated the humans. His sensor officers had finally completed a full scan of the solar system, and the results were terrifying. Hidden in the shadows of asteroids, buried beneath the surfaces of moons, concealed in the darkness between planets, a fleet. Not a small, primitive collection of ships like he had expected, but a genuine military force. 2,000 warships, each one designed and built in total secrecy. This is not possible, he whispered. Ambassador Taylor Voss stood beside him, her face pale. They've been preparing for us. For 80 years, they've been preparing for exactly this moment. Why didn't our intelligence know? Why didn't our probes detect any of this? Because they knew we were coming. Because they hid everything that mattered and showed us only what they wanted us to see. Taylor shook her head slowly. We thought we were conquering a primitive world. We walked into a trap. Admiral Vorath's pride refused to accept defeat. The Empire had 10,000 ships. The humans had 2,000. Even with their hidden weapons platforms, even with their secret technology, the numbers were still in his favor. Prepare the fleet for combat, he ordered. All ships to attack formation. We will crush this rebellion before it begins. Admiral, Taylor said urgently, perhaps we should contact High Command. Request guidance before... There's nothing to guide, Vorath snapped. They're still primitives. They've surprised us, yes, but surprise doesn't win wars. We have 8 times their numbers. We have 40,000 years of combat experience. We have the might of the entire Galaxy Empire behind us. He turned to face his command crew, his voice rising with confidence he didn't entirely feel. Today we teach these humans why no one defies the Empire. Today we show them what happens to species that forget their place. All ships advance, destroy their fleet, burn their defenses, and bring me that planet. The Imperial fleet began to move. 10,000 warships, each one the product of millennia of development, each one crewed by soldiers who had never known defeat. They spread across the solar system like a wave of destruction, confident in their superiority, certain of their victory. In the shadow of Mars, Admiral Chen Wei watched them come. Her fleet was outnumbered 5-1. Her ships were younger, less tested, crewed by soldiers who had trained in secret for a battle they hoped would never happen. But they were fighting for their home, their families, their future. Every person in that fleet knew exactly what was at stake. "All ships," she said, her voice calm and clear. "This is Admiral Chen Wei. The enemy is advancing. They think they know what we are. They think they know what we can do. They are wrong," she took a breath. "Today we show them the truth. Today we show them that Earth does not kneel. Today we show them that Terran skies belong to Terra." Her hand moved to the command console. "All ships, engage." The Battle of Sol had begun. Space burned. The darkness between Earth and Mars filled with fire as two fleets collided in the largest battle humanity had ever fought. Imperial warships, massive and ancient, traded volleys with human vessels that danced between their formations like wolves around elephants. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy beams carved glowing lines across the black. Ships died in brilliant explosions that briefly outshone the sun. Admiral Vorath watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his initial confidence crumbling with each passing hour. His fleet outnumbered the humans 5-1. His ships were larger, more heavily armed, protected by shields that had deflected attacks from 100 different species. None of that seemed to matter. The human ships were wrong. They moved wrong. They fought wrong. Everything about them defied Imperial military doctrine. "Their vessels are too fast," his tactical officer reported, frustration clear in his voice. "They're not engaging in standard formation. They strike, retreat, strike again from a different angle. Our targeting systems can't track them." "Then improve the targeting systems," Vorath snarled. "We're trying, Admiral, but their ships have some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered. They appear on sensors, disappear, reappear somewhere else. It's like fighting ghosts." Vorath turned to watch the battle display. Red dots marked his ships. Blue dots marked the enemy. The red dots were supposed to be winning. Instead, he watched as another cluster of red dots vanished from the screen, destroyed by an attack they never saw coming. Aboard the UTDF flagship Defiance, Admiral Chen Wei felt the deck shudder beneath her feet as enemy fire struck the shields. Her ship had been hit 17 times in the past hour. The shields were holding, but barely. Around her, officers shouted reports and coordinates, managing the chaos of battle with desperate efficiency. "Destroyer Group 7 is requesting support," her communications officer called out. "They're being overwhelmed by Imperial cruisers in Sector 9. Send the 4th Carrier Wing to assist. Have them use Formation Delta. Draw the cruisers toward the lunar platforms." "Yes, Admiral." Wei studied the tactical display. The battle was going better than she had expected, but that wasn't saying much. Human ships were faster and harder to track than the Imperial vessels, just as the engineers had promised. Their weapons were effective. Their crews were brave. But the Empire simply had too many ships. For every Imperial vessel they destroyed, 3 more took its place. Human losses were mounting. Ships that had taken decades to build in secret were burning in seconds. Good people, brave people, were dying by the thousands. But they were not dying for nothing. "Admiral," her sensor officer said suddenly, "I'm detecting a new energy signature from the enemy flagship. They're charging some kind of weapon we haven't seen before." Wei felt ice form in her stomach. "Can you identify it?" "Negative. But the power readings are massive. Whatever it is, it's not meant for our ships." She understood immediately. "It's a planetary bombardment weapon. They're going to attack Earth directly." The bridge went quiet. Every officer turned to look at her. They all knew what that meant. Millions of civilians, their families, their homes, everything they were fighting for. Wei closed her eyes for one brief moment. Then she opened them, and her voice was steel. "All ships in range of the enemy flagship converge on my position. We're going to stop that weapon from firing, whatever it takes." "Admiral, that's suicide. Their flagship is surrounded by heavy escorts. We don't have the firepower to—" I didn't ask for analysis, Commander. I gave an order. Every ship that can reach the enemy flagship will do so. We will destroy that weapon or die trying. There is no other option. She stood from her command chair and looked around at her crew. These were her people. She had trained with them, served with them, trusted them with her life. Now she was asking them to give that life for their planet. I'm not going to lie to you, she said. The odds are not in our favor. Many of us will not survive what comes next. But if we do nothing, Earth burns. Our families burn. Everything humanity has ever built, ever dreamed, ever hoped for, it all burns. She straightened her uniform. I would rather die fighting than live knowing I let that happen. If any of you feel differently, I won't judge you. But I'm going, and I'm taking as many of them with me as I can. No one moved, no one spoke. Then, one by one, her officers turned back to their stations and prepared for the assault. Lieutenant Kalen Dross had served the Empire for 30 years. He had fought in 17 campaigns, helped conquer 9 worlds, and earned every medal available to an officer of his rank. He thought he understood war. He thought he understood courage. He had never seen anything like this. From his station on the Eternal Dominion, he watched the human fleet reorganize. Damaged ships that should have retreated instead moved forward. Vessels that were literally burning, their hulls torn open, their crews dying, turned toward the Imperial flagship and accelerated. "What are they doing?" someone asked, horror in their voice. Kayla knew exactly what they were doing. They were sacrificing themselves, not for glory, not for conquest, not for any of the reasons Imperial soldiers fought and died. They were sacrificing themselves for their planet, for their families, for people they would never meet, who would never know their names. He watched a human destroyer, its engines failing, its weapons nearly depleted, ram itself into an Imperial cruiser. Both ships vanished in a ball of fire that briefly lit up the darkness. The human crew had known they were going to die. They had done it anyway. "Madness," Admiral Vorath muttered. "Complete madness. What kind of species throws away their lives like this?" Kalen wanted to answer. He wanted to say that it wasn't madness. It was love. Love for their home, their people, their children. A love so strong that death meant nothing compared to protecting it. But he stayed silent. He wasn't sure Vorath would understand. He wasn't sure any Imperial officer would understand. The Empire conquered worlds because conquest brought power and resources. They had never fought for something they loved so much they would die for it without hesitation. The human assault reached the Imperial flagship's escort screen. Ships died on both sides. Imperial cruisers exploded under concentrated fire. Human destroyers were torn apart by overwhelming firepower. The space around the Eternal Dominion became a graveyard of burning metal and frozen bodies. And still the humans came. Admiral Wei's flagship Defiance led the charge. Her shields had failed. Her port engines were destroyed. A hull breach on Deck 7 had killed 40 crew members. None of that stopped her. She drove her dying ship toward the enemy flagship with everything she had left. "Target their weapon array," she ordered. "All remaining missiles, all remaining power to the forward guns. We get one shot at this." The Defiance fired. Everything it had concentrated on a single point. The Imperial flagship's shields flared, flickered, and for one brief moment, failed. Human weapons tore into the enemy's hull. The planetary bombardment weapon, still charging, took multiple direct hits. Internal explosions rippled through the Imperial flagship as the massive weapon detonated prematurely, destroying entire sections of the ship from within. Admiral Vorath was thrown from his feet as the Eternal Dominion shook with the force of the blast. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in. His beautiful flagship, pride of the Imperial fleet, was crippled, but his ship survived. The Defiance did not. Kalen Dross watched the human flagship break apart, its structure torn open by a final Imperial volley. Escape pods launched from the dying vessel, tiny dots of hope ejecting into the chaos of battle. He counted them. There weren't many. The battle continued for another 6 hours. Both sides took terrible losses. Imperial reinforcement waves pushed the humans back toward Earth. Human defense platforms took a heavy toll on Imperial ships trying to approach the planet. Neither side could claim clear victory. When the fighting finally paused, Both fleets were devastated. The Empire had lost nearly 3,000 ships. Humanity had lost 800. The space between Earth and Mars was filled with debris, bodies, and the ghosts of the dead. Admiral Vorath sat in his damaged command center, staring at casualty reports he could barely comprehend. 3,000 ships. The Empire hadn't lost 3,000 ships in a single battle in over 4,000 years. The analysts had told him this would be easy. The intelligence reports had promised a primitive species with no real defenses. They had been wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. "Admiral," Ambassador Taylor Voss said quietly, appearing at his side, "we've received word from High Command. They're asking for a status report." "Tell them we've engaged the enemy," Vorath said bitterly. "Tell them we've taken losses. Tell them we need reinforcements if we're to complete this conquest." Taylor hesitated. "How many reinforcements?" Vorath looked at her with empty eyes. "All of them. Tell them to send everything." In the wreckage of the Defiance, rescue teams searched for survivors. They found Admiral Chen Wei floating in the darkness, her environmental suit damaged, her body broken, but somehow still alive. When they pulled her aboard a rescue shuttle, the first thing she asked was about her planet. "Earth's still there," the medic told her, tears in his eyes. "Your attack worked, Admiral. You stopped the weapon. Earth's still there." Wei closed her eyes. She had given everything. Her ship, her crew, nearly her own life. And it had been enough. For now. But as the medics worked to save her, she knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would send more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. This battle was won, but the war was far from over, and humanity had paid a terrible price for survival. 17 million civilians had died in the crossfire. Cities lay in ruins from orbital strikes that had slipped past the defenses. Families were shattered. Communities were destroyed. The cost of freedom was written in blood across the face of the Earth, but Earth remained free, and for now that had to be enough. Emperor Calith VII had ruled the Galaxy Empire for 300 years. In that time, he had overseen the annexation of 2,000 worlds. He had commanded fleets that numbered in the millions. He had never, not once, faced a genuine military threat. Now he sat on his throne in the Imperial Palace, reading reports that made his blood run cold. 3,000 ships lost, an entire Grand Fleet nearly destroyed, casualties numbering in the hundreds of thousands, all against a single primitive world that his advisors had promised would fall in days. "Explain this to me," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Explain how a species we classified as level 7 managed to do this to us." His military commanders shifted uncomfortably. Director Koth Malene of Intelligence stepped forward, his face gray with stress. "Your Majesty, we believe the humans detected our survey probe 80 years ago. They have spent the time since preparing specifically for this conflict. Everything we observed about them was a deliberate deception. A deception that fooled the greatest intelligence service in the galaxy?" Malene lowered his head. "Yes, Your Majesty." The Emperor stood from his throne and walked to the massive window that overlooked the Imperial capital. Billions of lights spread across the night side of the planet, each one representing subjects who believed the Empire was invincible. What would happen when they learned the truth? "Admiral Vorath has requested the Annihilation Fleet," he said. "He wants us to send enough firepower to sterilize their entire star system, turn their world to glass, make an example of them." "It would be effective, Your Majesty," one of his generals said. "No species in history has survived the Annihilation Fleet. It would demonstrate that resistance is truly futile." "Would it?" The Emperor turned to face his advisors. "Word of this battle is already spreading. Despite our best efforts at censorship, the subject worlds know that someone bloodied our Grand Fleet. They know that a species we called primitive nearly destroyed us. What message does Annihilation send?" He began to pace. "It tells them we were so afraid of humans that we had to destroy them completely. It tells them that the Empire can be hurt, can be frightened, can be forced to resort to total destruction because we couldn't win any other way. Is that the message we want to send?" The advisors exchanged uncomfortable glances. None of them had considered this perspective. Far from the Imperial throne room, in the ruined city of Geneva on Earth, Secretary General Marcus Chen stood before the grave of his sister. Admiral Chen Wei had survived the battle, but her injuries had been too severe. She had died 3 days later, surrounded by the officers who loved her. The funeral had been private. The grief was not. Across Earth, 17 million families mourned. Cities that had stood for centuries were rubble. The victory that had saved the planet had also scarred it forever. And everyone knew this was only the beginning. Marcus knelt and placed a flower on his sister's grave. She had been the warrior. He was the politician. She had fought the battle. Now he had to find a way to end the war. His communicator buzzed. He answered it. "Mr. Secretary General," his aide said, "we've received a communication from the Imperial Fleet. Ambassador Taylor Voss is requesting a meeting." Marcus closed his eyes. Part of him wanted to refuse. Part of him wanted to tell the Empire to burn in whatever hell their species believed in. But Wei hadn't died so he could indulge his anger. She had died so humanity could survive. "Arrange the meeting," he said. "I'll speak with her." The meeting took place in what remained of the UN headquarters. Ambassador Taylor Voss came alone, escorted by human soldiers who looked at her with barely concealed hatred. She understood their anger. She had helped cause the destruction around her. Every corpse, every ruined building, every grieving family was partially her responsibility. She found Secretary General Chen waiting in a room with shattered windows that looked out over a city of rubble. He was older than she had expected from the broadcasts, tired, grieving, but his eyes were still sharp, still determined. "Ambassador Voss," he said, not offering his hand. "Secretary General Chen." She didn't expect courtesy. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. What does the Empire want?" Taylor took a breath. She had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times. None of her preparation seemed adequate now. "Admiral Vorath has requested the Annihilation Fleet. If it comes, your entire species will be destroyed. Every human, every city, every trace that your kind ever existed. Nothing will remain." Chen's expression didn't change. "You came to warn us?" "I came to ask a question." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What do you want? Not victory, because victory is impossible against the full might of the Empire. Not survival through surrender, because your people have made clear they won't accept that. So what do you want? What outcome are you fighting for?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. He walked to the broken window and looked out at the ruins of Geneva. "Do you know what my sister said before she died?" he asked. "She said that humanity fights differently than other species. We don't fight for territory or resources or glory. We fight for the right to exist on our own terms." He turned to face Taylor. "That's what we want, Ambassador. We don't want to conquer you. We don't want to destroy you. We don't want anything from you except to be left alone. Give us our freedom. Let us live our lives. Stop trying to own us." Taylor stared at him. That's all. That's everything. Our home, our sky, our future. Those aren't small things, Ambassador. Those are the only things that matter. But you could demand so much more. You hurt us. You humiliated us. The Empire has never been wounded like this. You could demand territory, reparations, revenge. Chen shook his head slowly. "Revenge won't bring back my sister. It won't rebuild our cities. It won't undo the suffering your fleet has caused. All revenge would do is continue the cycle of violence until one of us is completely destroyed." He met her eyes, and she saw something in his gaze that confused her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't triumph. It was something she hadn't expected to find in a man who had lost everything. It was compassion. "I don't hate you, Ambassador. I hate what you've done. I hate what your empire stands for. But I don't hate you as a person. I don't hate your species. I just want you to leave us in peace." Taylor felt something shift inside her. She had served the Empire her entire life. She had believed in its mission of order and unity. She had told herself that subjugated species were better off under imperial rule, that the conquered eventually became grateful citizens. But standing in this ruined city, facing a man who had every reason to demand blood, and instead asked only for freedom, she began to doubt everything she had believed. "I'll return to my ship," she said quietly. "I'll tell Admiral Vorath and the Emperor what you've said. Do you think they'll listen?" "I don't know, but I'll make them listen." She hesitated. "For what it's worth, Secretary General, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what we've done to your world. I'm sorry for your sister. I'm sorry for all of it. Chen nodded slowly. Words don't mean much right now, Ambassador, but thank you for saying them. As Taylor walked back to her shuttle, she passed a young Imperial officer waiting near the entrance. Lieutenant Kalen Dross had been assigned as her escort. He had been quiet throughout the journey, but now he spoke. Ambassador, may I ask what the humans want? Peace, she said simply. They want peace. Kalen frowned. But they won. They hurt us badly. They could demand anything. They could. They didn't. Taylor looked at him. What does that tell you, Lieutenant? Kalen didn't have an answer, but as he followed the ambassador back to the shuttle, he couldn't stop thinking about the question. He had spent his career fighting enemies who wanted power, territory, revenge. He had never fought an enemy who just wanted to be left alone. Maybe, he thought, that was why they were so dangerous. They weren't fighting for things that could be taken away. They were fighting for something that couldn't be destroyed as long as even one of them remained alive. They were fighting for their soul. Back on Earth, Marcus Chen stood alone in the ruins of Geneva as night fell. The stars were coming out, and somewhere among them, the Imperial fleet waited. Death waited. The end of everything humanity had ever built waited. But so did hope. Fragile, uncertain hope that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. He didn't know if the Empire would listen. He didn't know if peace was possible with a civilization that had spent 40,000 years conquering everything it touched. But he knew that he had to try, because that was what humans did. They hoped. They struggled. They refused to give up even when giving up was the only rational choice. And sometimes, against all odds, they won. Emperor Calith VII did something no emperor had done in 4,000 years. He spoke directly to a species that had not submitted to imperial rule. His message reached Earth 3 days after Ambassador Voss returned to the fleet. It was broadcast on every channel, transmitted in every human language. And it began not with demands, but with a question. People of Earth, the Emperor said, his ancient face filling screens across the planet. I have read the reports from your world. I have spoken with my ambassador about your leader's words. And I find myself asking something I have never asked before. What kind of future do you envision? In homes and hospitals, in refugee camps and military bases, humanity watched in stunned silence. The Empire has existed for 40,000 years, the Emperor continued. In that time, we have brought order to millions of worlds. We have ended wars. We have shared technology. We have built something we believed was good and right. But we have never been challenged. We have never been forced to question whether our methods were the best methods or simply the only methods we knew. He paused and something changed in his expression, something that almost looked like doubt. You have made us question. You have shown us that a species can be stronger than our weapons, braver than our soldiers, more determined than our empire. You have paid a terrible price for that lesson, but you have taught it nonetheless. He straightened on his throne. I am not prepared to order your destruction, not because we lack the power. We could erase your world tomorrow, but destruction would teach us nothing. It would change nothing. It would prove only that we were afraid of what you represented. Instead, I offer something the Empire has never offered before. I offer negotiation, genuine negotiation between equals. Tell me what future you envision, and we will see if there is a path that does not end in more death. Secretary General Marcus Chen received the message in his temporary office. He read it 3 times, searching for the trap, the hidden threat, the manipulation he was certain must be there. He found nothing but uncertainty and the faint, fragile possibility of peace. The negotiations began 1 week later. They were the most difficult discussions in human history. The Empire had never treated another species as equals. They didn't know how. Their negotiators made demands they expected to be accepted without question. Human representatives pushed back on every point. Ambassador Taylor Voss served as the Empire's chief negotiator. She had requested the position, driven by something she couldn't quite name. Guilt, perhaps, or curiosity, or the strange feeling that had settled in her chest since standing in the ruins of Geneva. Across the table sat Dr. Amara Osei, humanity's lead diplomat. She was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her career negotiating trade deals and border disputes between nations. Now she was trying to end a war with an alien empire. "You're asking us to accept your laws in our system," Dr. O.C. said during one tense session. "That's not negotiation. That's surrender with extra steps." "Imperial law provides structure," Taylor countered. "It ensures stability. Imperial law was written for conquered peoples. We're not conquered. We're talking because we both decided killing each other wasn't worth the cost. That makes us partners, not subjects." The discussions went on for months. Both sides struggled to understand each other. The Empire couldn't comprehend why humans refused advantages that came with subjugation. Humans couldn't understand why the Empire saw freedom as something to be granted rather than claimed. But slowly, painfully, understanding grew. Lieutenant Kalen Dross transferred to the diplomatic mission as a military liaison. He spent long hours talking with human soldiers, trying to understand what made them different. One evening, a young human corporal named Yuki asked him a question that changed everything. "Why do you fight?" she asked. Kalen considered the question. "Because I'm ordered to. Because it's my duty. Because the Empire requires it." "But do you believe in it? Do you wake up in the morning thinking about how you're making the galaxy better?" He didn't have an answer. Yuki smiled sadly. "I do. Every morning I think about my family, my little brother who wants to be an artist, my grandmother who still tends her garden even though she's 90 years old. I fight because I want them to have a future where they can be whatever they want to be, not what an empire tells them to be." Kalen thought about that conversation for weeks. He thought about it when the Treaty of Seoul was finally drafted. He thought about it when both sides signed an agreement that changed the course of galactic history. The treaty was simple in principle, complex in detail. Earth and its solar system would remain fully sovereign, free from any imperial control. Humans would have the right to travel through imperial space as guests, not subjects. In exchange, humanity would share the technologies they had developed during their secret preparation, including faster-than-light methods the Empire had never imagined. But the most important part of the treaty was something that couldn't be written down. It was the agreement to try something new, to build a relationship based on partnership rather than domination, to prove that different species could work together without one ruling the other. Ambassador Voss requested permanent posting to Earth after the treaty was signed. She wanted to understand these strange people who had refused to break. She wanted to learn how they saw the universe. Lieutenant Dross applied for the new Imperial Terran exchange program. His commanders thought he was crazy. His colleagues thought he was throwing away his career. He didn't care. He had spent 30 years learning how to conquer. Now he wanted to learn something else. 1 year after the treaty, the first human diplomatic vessel arrived at the Imperial capital. It was a small ship called the Hope, unarmed and crewed by just 50 people. Compared to the massive Imperial warships that surrounded it, the vessel was tiny and fragile. But billions watched as it landed. On Earth, on Imperial worlds, on the subjugated planets that had been watching very carefully since news of the war first spread. Secretary General Marcus Chen led the human delegation. He walked through the Imperial Senate chamber, past rows of alien senators who had never seen a human in person. He climbed the steps to the speaker's platform. He faced the Emperor himself. "Your Majesty," he began, "Senators of the Empire, thank you for receiving us." He looked out at the assembled faces, knowing that his words would be heard on a million worlds. "1 year ago, we were at war. Your fleet filled our sky. Our cities burned. Millions of our people died. We had every reason to hate you, every reason to seek revenge, every reason to believe that the only good Imperial was a dead Imperial." A murmur ran through the chamber. "But we chose differently. We chose to believe that people who had only known one way of doing things could learn another way. We chose to believe that an empire built on conquest could transform into something better. We chose to believe that the future didn't have to be like the past." He straightened his shoulders. "We did not fight to prove we are better than you. We fought because we believe every species deserves to determine its own destiny. We truly hope, that one day every world in your empire will enjoy the same freedom we were willing to die for." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "That is the future we envision. Not domination, not revenge, not conquest. Partnership, cooperation, a galaxy where different species work together because they choose to, not because they were forced to. He smiled slightly. We know it won't be easy. We know old habits die hard. We know there will be setbacks and misunderstandings and moments when both sides wonder if this was a mistake. But we believe it's worth trying. We believe you're worth believing in. The chamber was silent. Then slowly one senator began to applaud. Then another. Then dozens. The sound built until it echoed through the ancient hall. Emperor Caliph VII rose from his throne and descended the steps to stand before Marcus Chen. For a long moment, the two leaders simply looked at each other. Then the emperor extended his hand in the human gesture he had learned. We accept your vision, Secretary General. Let us build this future together. 10 years later, the galaxy had changed. The first subjugated species to petition for sovereignty was the Velkari, a peaceful people who had been conquered 8,000 years earlier. They had watched humanity's example. They had seen that freedom was possible. They had asked for it politely but firmly. Emperor Caliph VII, advised by humans who had become trusted counselors, granted their request. Other petitions followed. One by one, worlds that had been forced into the empire were given the choice to remain or leave. Most chose to stay, but they stayed as partners, not subjects. They stayed because they wanted to, not because they had to. Admiral Chen Wei's former flagship, the rebuilt Defiance, became a symbol of the new alliance. It served as a meeting place for human and imperial diplomats, a neutral ground where the difficult work of building trust continued. On Earth, the cities had been rebuilt. The scars of war were fading. A new generation was growing up in a world where the stars were open to them, where alien friends visited their schools, where the future held possibilities their grandparents could never have imagined. Admiral Chen Wei had been buried on a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the same waters where imperial ships had first darkened the sky. Her grandson, a young man named David who had inherited her determination, visited her grave every year on the anniversary of the battle. This year he brought his daughter. She was 4 years old with bright eyes full of wonder. She didn't understand why her father was sad, but she held his hand and looked up at the sky. "Daddy, what are those?" she asked, pointing at lights moving among the stars. "Those are ships, sweetheart, from Earth and from far away." "Are they friends?" David smiled through his tears. He thought about everything his grandmother had sacrificed, everything his grandfather had negotiated, everything humanity had endured to reach this moment. "Yes," he said, "they're friends now." Above them, Terran skies stretched endless and free, filled with ships from 100 worlds, all of them at peace, all of them choosing cooperation over conquest, because that was the future humanity had envisioned, and that was the future they had built. The sky was no longer dark with threat, it was bright with promise, and Earth remained Earth, free, proud, and forever master of its own destiny.